that the British like to drink tea. Well, it's part of their national culture, but you probably wouldn't expect their love of tea to lead to drug addiction and war. Oddly enough, this is exactly what happened in the late 1700s.
The seeds of the crisis were this. The British wanted Chinese tea. At first, the Chinese were willing to take Indian cotton in exchange for the tea. But eventually, the British demand for tea outstripped the Chinese demand for cotton. The British needed a new trade good. They found one in opium, an addictive drug.
The British now had what they wanted, more tea. But the cost was heavy for the Chinese. Soon, opium addiction was widespread in China.
When the Chinese government tried to put an end to the opium trade, the British refused. The result was war.
In this CNN report, you'll see how the conflict changed the course of both Chinese and British history.
Long before Hong Kong became the bustling trading and financial hub that it is today, it was much like any other fishing community along the vast coasts of China. Most of the mainland's important trade with Western powers took place up the Pearl River in Canton. In the early 19th century, that trade became tainted with what the Chinese called foreign mud, better known as opium.
Opium played a part in all companies' trade with China in the early part of the 19th century. It was a very common thing. It didn't have the moral stigma attached to it, which it now does.
For Jardine and other British traders, selling the addictive drug was a simple solution to an imbalance of trade. For the Chinese, it was a curse. Eventually, the opium trade sparked two wars between Britain and China. It was a humiliating defeat. China was forced to cede Hong Kong and Kowloon to Britain forever. Years later, as other Western powers were claiming treaty ports around China, Britain wanted more, and in 1898 took a 99-year lease on the new territories. That lease runs out in July. But with the new territories, China will also get Hong Kong and Kowloon back.
They probably calculated that if things remain pretty much as they were in 1898, then in 100 years' time, the British Empire would still be the empire over which the sun never sets.
100 years ago, no one foresaw what Hong Kong would become. Back then, it was not much more than a dirty seaport. These old gravestones are testimony to the disease and violence of those early years.
Cholera, dysentery, diphtheria, smallpox, all the 19th century diseases that carried people away. It was, the numbers of people that died was quite incredible.
And if it wasn't disease that claimed lives, it was the pirates who ruled the high seas. But there was no question over who controlled the mountaintop. The British, from their grand homes on the peak, oversaw a colony that was booming. By the end of the 19th century, 2 million tons of goods passed through the harbor every year. Hong Kong was well on its way to becoming the economic miracle it is today. Mei Li, CNN, Hong Kong.
So what became of Hong Kong in the 100 years of British occupation? This next CNN story shows that the combining of Chinese and British cultures has created a very unique city, a city that is now entering a new age of Chinese rule.
There's a lot in this place that you'll never find with a spin of the rack. Sometimes Hong Kong will reveal itself, past, present, and future, all in a glance. But you have to look sharp. Whatever happens, it'll never be quite this way again. It never is. You can try to carve things in stone, as Wing Yuan carves chops. People want new ones to stamp, welcome the handover on their letters. If nothing ever changed, the chop business would petrify. Permanence guaranteed at Ricky's Tattoo Parlor, but here, tastes are always changing. Ricky made up these for the handover. He says they're really popular with Americans and Australians. But Hong Kong people don't care to wear indelible political opinions. Hong Kong's always been in a hurry, but now that the race with Shanghai is on, there's no time to lose. Onward and upward, with the world's longest escalator system, Hong Kong's answer to China's long march. Hong Kongers have to be upwardly mobile. Developers have a little land and a lot of chips, and they stack them high. Here, a sampan suburb dwindles as the neighbors go high-rise. But they still use bamboo scaffolding here because it holds up better in typhoons, just as they favor abacus over calculator because it's faster. If you don't believe it, changes. You're still digesting your dim sum brunch from the traditional floating restaurant. And you're off to that most genteel of English institutions, afternoon tea at the grand old Peninsula Hotel. Hong Kong, capital of world superlatives. Most billionaires per capita, highest ownership of Rolls-Royces, most cell phones, 1 person in 10 has one, and the metro's fixed so you can phone on the move underground. What's Hong Kong short of? Revolving doors, for one. They cost more than doormen. Also, bargains, restaurants as modest as this one, and horn-blaring rush-hour free-for-alls like you'd see in any self-respecting city elsewhere. Hong Kongers wait for lights to turn and seem to know that with density like theirs, the choice is get along or explode. Whatever happens to Hong Kong now, they'll know how to cool it. Richard Blystone, CNN, Hong Kong.
It remains to be seen what will happen as Hong Kong makes the transition from British to Chinese rule. After a century of cross-cultural exchange, it will most likely take years for the city to set a new course.
And recent discord between China's government and other world powers may signal a rocky road ahead.